Today, we're getting under the hood with Dr. Shelina Ramnarine, a daughter, sister, women's advocate, systems thinker, and strategist who blends scientific rigor with human insight to drive meaningful change. With a PhD in Human and Statistical Genetics, Shelina combines her scientific acumen, data fluency, and strategic thinking across R&D, market access, business development, and health equity, transforming visionary ideas into impactful outcomes built from a decade of experience at Johnson & Johnson. Shelina leads with curiosity, clarity, and care, guiding cross-functional teams, cultivating partnerships, and designing systems that truly serve people. Her leadership is relational, intentional, and grounded in a deep commitment to equity and community. Wow, welcome, Shelina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, and I'm absolutely delighted. It's an interesting season 4, Women's March for Mental Wellness. And I'm really excited to be getting under the hood with you today, Shelina. So if it's okay, let's get going.
I'm ready.
Awesome. This is a great question because, often we don't think about this, but what was that inflection point that really got you on your mental health and wellness journey?
Oh my goodness. I first started in therapy like 15 years ago. When I was in graduate school, I had just moved from Georgia to St. Louis. I got my PhD at WashU in St. Louis, and I was actually dating a guy, and then we broke up. And I was like, how do I function? Like, what do I do now? I realized I was so used to kind of relying on him and talking to him about everything. And so I decided to go to therapy for the first time to kind of deal with how I felt about a lot of my childhood and figure out how do I think for myself now that I was out of this relationship that looking back on, I was probably very codependent in.
Wow. It's so interesting how these things start. And I think kudos to you for going into therapy, for recognizing that having that third party really gives you a third person, someone to talk to and really share how you're feeling. And yeah, interesting to recognize the codependency. So talk about your journey coming out of that. There is a thread of the mental health and wellness. We want to get to know Shelina. You've been doing so many things with your life. So take us on a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I was looking at a video of myself from years ago, talking about leadership. And I was saying in the video, and this was maybe 10 years ago, that what is important in leadership is also the journey that the leader has to take. And I was reflecting on that, of how much I have really invested in and poured in myself. I've been going to therapy on and off for years because to me, it just gives you a different perspective. It gives you a space to process, to really understand what are the things that have shaped you and made you the way that you are. But most recently, I went through kind of like an intense therapeutic journey in the last year because I found myself in this role that had so many elements of my dream job, but the environment and the space really was stifling me. It felt like such a weight on my spirit and really just didn't mirror and match who I knew myself to be. The voices that I was hearing, the feedback I was getting about myself didn't match at all. And it created this cognitive dissonance where it was like who I know myself to be is not matching what I'm hearing, what's happening. So I actually went into this 10-week, 10-hour per week dialectic behavioral therapy program. And I was so angry at the time because it was the summer and I wanted to just enjoy the summer and hang out with my friends rather than be in an intensive therapy program. But it was one of the best things that could have happened to me. I mean, dialectic behavioral therapy is not a form of therapy that I think a lot of people are familiar with. But for me, I feel like so many elements of it should be taught to everyone. There are 4 key parts of DBT. It's about emotional regulation. Oh my gosh, have I learned so much about emotional regulation in the last year and just the challenges people have on naming their feelings. Like I literally had to get a feeling wheel so I could figure out what is it exactly that I'm feeling and how to name my feelings. Another part of it is stress is tolerance. So, what do you do when you're too stimulated, when you're too regulated, when you can't have a conversation about how you're feeling? Another part is mindfulness, which is awareness without judgment. And I have to tell you, Elizabeth, I did not realize how much I judged myself. Like that, just learning how to notice something without judging it, that was like a form of therapy and maybe like a spirituality on its own. And then the last part of DBT is about interpersonal effectiveness, which is about how to communicate for what you want. So that DBT program totally rewired me. I learned so much about my nervous system. I learned so much about when I'm under stress, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, how that shows up for me, how to understand when I'm outside of my window of tolerance, which is kind of like the zone that you can manage, that you can handle. How do I get myself back into a window of tolerance? How do I deal with big feelings? I mean, it taught me so much.
I just want to applaud you. I want to pause for a second and just say, good for you for taking the time and really looking within that. And I'm not trying to make it singular, but that DBT is creating such a sense of self-awareness and then strategies and tools of how to deal with things that most of us humans don't deal with. And so if you can learn that at this stage of your life, these tools, you're going to be able to fly in such a way to really expand yourself in ways, because that will be under control. That won't be a challenge for you. Taking the time to do that is something you should feel really good about.
Thank you. I mean, that's why I love DBT. It's very skills based. And that's exactly why I think everyone needs to learn some of these skills. Like, could you imagine how different the world would be if we all understood just the concept of emotional regulation? And for me, like learning about DBT and learning these skills was phenomenal. But then after that, I went to do trauma therapy. And I had to kind of like make a list of what are the things that have happened in my life that have created negative core beliefs inside of me. Because DBT is kind of like the surface, like how do you manage the behaviors and the feelings? But the trauma therapy was like, what are the unwritten stories you're telling yourself that are going on in the background that are then leading to these feelings? So it was like a double click, taking a step back. And that was kind of the most confronting thing I ever did in my life, spending 4 months mapping all of my negative core beliefs and where they come from and deconstructing those thoughts. And in from that process, then I went to somatic therapy, which taught me a lot about how to feel my feelings. So, all of these different forms of therapy that I had never even heard about before I started this journey last year, have just been so life changing. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity today to share with you because I think many people aren't aware of these. And I feel like, man, I just want everyone to know so that we can all get the healing that we need, you know?
I love that. And I think that just sharing your story and what are the stories we tell ourselves, but like just even sharing that thinking, what are the stories we tell ourselves? And how does it shape how we feel about ourselves and
Yes.
how we go out into the world and interact and stuff. And I think it's very interesting, Shelina. This is really resonating with me and touching me on a deep level. And I'll tell you why. Because taking the time, we are often, and in particular, women are so often busy doing, accomplishing, trying to achieve. You talk about perfectionism, trying to be perfect. And I know we've talked about that previously. And it's all about the doing. We don't take the time to sit and deal with who we are. So we're busy dealing with our external world and how we go out into the world, but not really understanding our inner world. And so I think you sharing your story, first of all, thank you for doing that. It's hugely helpful to women around the world. It's bold and it's powerful and it's life changing. And so I think continuing on that journey, I mean, you had such a big career, a decade at J&J. Let's continue on this journey with you and talk about, if it's okay, the intermingling, the integration. What was that moment? 15 years ago, you started therapy, but what was that moment that said a year ago, I'm going to pause and, sort of take time to get to know me and deal with me?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had no choice. Like life was Life was a little like whether or not you want to go on this journey, I'm putting it in front of you, right? So I remember the day that I decided to go on leave from J&J, and I just kept asking myself, did I fail? Because I'm an immigrant. I came to America when I was 10. I didn't know anything about college, and I ended up double majoring in statistics and biology. Then went to get my PhD, one of the best schools in the country. And like that was so hard. I literally told myself nothing will break me like graduate school broke me. And I had had 6 roles at J&J in 8 years. I had moved up pretty quickly and moved through roles. I was in departments that, most people don't get to be in. So I had this kind of like favor, the year before I went on leave, I was named a rising star in J&J, and I was the first Black woman to get that award in 8 years. So I had kind of like in my mind felt like I could do things, I could change things. During the pandemic, I made these videos talking about microaggressions. So that way people wouldn't have to share their stories if they don't want to, because that could be traumatizing. I was the head of the women's group. I was over like the African American group, creating functions that started conversations. So I had a lot of my identity built into this change maker. I gave a TED talk focused on activism when I didn't even have a job at JJ. I was a postdoc. So there had been a lot of ways that I had pushed the boundaries and been successful in that. And so to see myself come to this place where going on leave for me meant I can no longer be in this environment. And that was really that ate at my pride to say that I can't handle it. Like that felt like a failure. I was like, how did I grow up not having indoor plumbing, not having hot water for a part of my childhood, and I can't handle this environment? And I think many of my friends felt like, why is this hitting you so hard? Why is the feedback that you're receiving in this environment bothering you so hard when you have been through so many worse things? And that also made me feel a little insecure. Like, why is what people are saying to me so hard for me? And I realized that I have put so much value on strength, on doing, on pushing through. And my mind and body was saying, I can't push through this. You're not valuing how much pain I'm feeling by what people are saying to me. You're not valuing what that's triggering in you from your childhood, from things you've heard throughout your life. And you're wanting me to push through this. And I refused. So all of my coping mechanisms, they weren't working. I was not coping. And it was really like an ego death to admit that like the me that I had built that I was so proud of, she could no longer survive. She could no longer keep it together. And I had to let her go. I had to let go of the version of me that I knew that I was so proud of and sit in the who am I? How do I function? How do I navigate life now when what I knew of myself is gone? And that chrysalis phase, that butterfly imagery when everything melts, and everything you knew, your way of being no longer works, is so painful. And it was so hard for so many months. I often would think like, am I ever going to get back to me? And then I had to let go of that me because I was never going to get back to her. She didn't work. And so I've just had to be really patient as I've built the new me. And I shouldn't even say I've built it. I've allowed the new me to come to me, to be revealed to me, to pay attention enough to listen to her, to see her, to notice her in the moments. So it's been a journey.
So much of what you're saying resonates to me, where women, our identity can get so wrapped up in what we're accomplishing, be it on the job, as a mother, all those different combination of things that women go through. And I think that, while maybe you didn't have a choice, maybe you did do the choice, which was, I need to do
Yeah.
this. I need to look within. And I think it's interesting, I can relate to that, being at the top, doing all these things and having an ego death. I call it an ego sedation, just sort of changing. But the reason why I say that, Shelina, is most women, I don't know if it's probably 95% of women, I don't know the exact stat, because this is a very it's both tangible and intangible. Don't take the time to go on this journey, put the ego aside and see and find out who you are. And, who am I? What's life all about, Alfie? I mean, and so I think that you almost, it's not even giving yourself grace. It's like applauding yourself. It's hugging yourself and saying, I did this and I've taken the time, because you only come out stronger. You only recognize how truly resilient you are. I mean, hearing what you went through with the DBT therapy, just taking the time to go through, process that, and give that air and energy is just extraordinary.
Things that I have put the most energy into my life were my career and my relationships. And my
Mm.
friendships changed so in so many ways at the same time my career completely did. So no one wants to look at themselves and say, the two things that I've invested in the most have completely shattered. No one wants to completely lose their sense of self and see their world as they know it completely change. It is incredibly painful. And so I understand why many people don't want to go on the journey, why they avoid it. But I knew that like this was the time to deal with these things because the me that was going to be on the other side was the me that I needed to get to. No sense of who she was going to be or what she was going to look like, but I just knew this me wasn't working. And I couldn't pretend anymore like it was. It's kind of like there's no water behind you. You don't know if there's water ahead of you, but you got to go on the journey because there's nothing left for you behind you. And when I first went on leave, I ordered a bunch of books because I'm such an intellectualizer. So I ordered all these therapy books on DBT, on CBT. And my therapist just laughs at me because he's like, you can't schedule healing. Like you can't schedule it into this course. It's like I try to make a healing course for myself. And one day I just felt like what broke you is not what's going to heal you. And it made me realize that I was doing everything in my head. I wasn't being in my body. And so it forced me to go on this journey of like learning how to feel my feelings. I didn't realize how hard that was for me. Like I sat for months with like, what does that even mean to feel your feelings? So I bring this up to say, Elizabeth, I think a lot of us are just disconnected from ourselves. And the way that we're holding on to what we know is just by stifling it, shoving it down, putting it under the rug because we just want to keep going. And I as a person have been in survival so much that it was just the norm. I didn't even see it as survival. It was just like, well, what do you mean? Like, isn't this how we function? And I am so grateful to what you said about going on the journey, like the freedom I have now, the way I can sit with my emotions now, the way I'm in tune with myself and know my body now is such a gift. And I'm so grateful that I got to meet this me because I don't know, there's just so much more now. There's so much more that I can create. There's so much more that I can be connected with other people on. There's so much more that I can see of myself. So I just say that to encourage anybody like the journey is not easy and no one will like it, but it's like the you get to meet on the other side is totally worth it.
I think what's also something is just sitting and saying, listen, this doesn't take away from my lived experiences, meaning all that you've done professionally doesn't go away. This is just taking time to not focus on the external Shelina, focus on the internal Shelina, because when the two come together, it's going to be the most magical thing because you're this brilliant woman and now you have the capacity to really be able to deal with the emotional side of life and you and connect the two. And I think you're right that, most people, but let's focus on women, we're so focused on the doing part of life. And you made a comment that we're pushing down what we're feeling. I don't even know that we're consciously doing that. I would say we're more
Agreed.
consciously focusing on what things look like externally. And I think there's a great book, The Second Mountain. I just like the metaphor of it because the first mountain is traveling. It's all about getting to the top, but it's all focused on everything, what you were saying about Shelina, all the accomplishments, becoming, the rising star at J&J, the first Black woman in 8 years. Like it's just amazing all the accomplishments and things you achieved. Whereas something happens, you fall off that first mountain. It could be a loss of a big job, it could be a divorce, it could be any number of things. And then you're on this journey of the second mountain. The second mountain's an interesting journey. It's the journey that you've been taking. And so it's about that inner, it's about that spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey is it really about finding out who we are. And so I think it is a gift and it's applauded and it should be that everybody should go on it. Well, not everybody's going to go on it. So we're focusing on Shelina today and I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm curious, Shelina, as you are talking and sharing about this, how would you describe You March for Mental Wellness? Like, what's your thing?
I feel like I used to look so much for my needs in other people. And to me, mental wellness is about learning that like you within yourself have everything you need. And the first times I heard that, it sounded nice, but I didn't really know what that meant. So my word of this year is actually abundance. And I opened Instagram towards the beginning of the year, and this content person that I follow said that abundance means that you have everything you need inside of you. And I had to like sit with that. Like, what does that mean? And I realized to what we were talking about the career, like, I love accomplishing things. I love being able to say, I worked really hard on this and this happened, but I can't root my identity in my accomplishments. Because when your identity is rooted in your accomplishments, it's like you're always having to hustle for your worthiness.
Everybody needs to hear this. I think that that is brilliant. I keep going. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. Well, I can't fully claim credit for it. I read Brene Brown's book, The Gifts of
Yes.
Imperfection, and she first introduced me to the phrase hustle for your worthiness. And I actually had it on my phone every day. I'd have a reminder that went off that said, you don't have to hustle for your worthiness. Because I realized that I had put my identity, who I am, in what I did. And basically, I was just always chasing the next high. And so this process has told me, this mental health process has taught me that my identity is not up for negotiation and it's not determined by my actions. It just is. Like our value as people just is. Who we are just is. Like we get to decide that every day, and our identity evolves through our actions. Tomorrow I could decide I'm going to be a runner and I just get up and run. And then like months from now I become a runner. It's so much more malleable than I thought, and it doesn't need to be grounded in my output because then you'll always feel that pressure and that focus on your output rather than just being, just living life and creating. That was like a big shift for me. And that's what mental health for me is all about. Like learning how to sit with yourself, learning how to show up for your needs. We all need love, care. We all need to feel that sense of worthiness. And we don't like, it's not that I'm saying that we should be self reliant and never care about what other people think about us. I think we should. But I mean, in the sense that you can give that love to yourself. You can find your own worthiness within yourself. You can find that care within yourself. It lives in your actions, it lives in the moments of self abandonment, in the time we spend with ourselves and the focus of ourselves. And so that's what mental health is for me. It's like going on that journey of like learning how to recognize that your abundance is within yourself and kind of like being with yourself.
I mean, it's something that we live by with Under the Sisterhood because I think that we often don't recognize that. So you've gone on this journey now, you're here, you're doing, you know who you are. What are you imagining?
It's so wild because if you told me like 2 years ago that I would be here, I'd be like, what? No, I would be freaking out. But I just have this piece where I'm just letting things unfold. And I have to tell you, Elizabeth, it took me like 8 months to understand the concept of radical acceptance. I was like, what? Accept what? realize that you can't change what? What do you mean? I want to change it. I want to do it. I was so in the active energy. And I don't know what happened, but now I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to do things that I find interesting, but I'm going to let things unfold. And so I'm letting things unfold and I'm learning how to have faith that there is a vision for me, that there is a plan for me. I'm super passionate about sharing what I've learned, particularly with women, because I just think that there are so many societal messages that negatively impact women and stop us from reaching our truest potential. So I'm just dreaming about how can I continue to show up for myself, but be of service to others. And I'm really open to what that looks like. And I'm finding so many opportunities like this one to be able to do just that. So things are coming to me. Like there is something to that.
And you commented about being of service to women, of like, how can I do that? And I think that it's just, you'll be able to integrate all of the different things. So, yes, you have this experience. You're never going to stop being that type of critical thinker and that visionary and that person who thinks differently and approaches things. And it's interesting, having had a pivotal moment in my life, like I want to live this clean life where I go in and I just do things, no agenda, just to do the things that, living a life of purpose and meaning. And so I think that, yeah,
Yeah, I've always been passionate about healthcare. My grandma is Indian and I grew up with my Indian family. So I grew up as this like little Black girl with like my Indian family. And so that is really where my curiosity around health comes from. Because I've always wondered like, well, what does that mean for my health? And, once I learned about like the rates of diabetes, hypertension in the African American community, and then when I was in grad school in St. Louis, that's when Mike Brown was killed. So, an image that is forever in my head is of this little boy holding a sign at a protest that says, I matter. And that was such a pivotal moment for me because I thought about when I was a kid, I never told anybody I mattered. The color of my skin, my race didn't determine my life in the way that I see it in America. And so once I saw that, I was one of three Black people getting my PhD across 12 programs in that time. So it taught me that, there are going to be places that I'm in where there are no people that look like me. And so I never feel like I can be a voice for anybody because, like, I don't know other people's experiences, but I do think that it's important to highlight things that people might not be aware of so that they can get more curious and that they can go talk to people that are in those situations. And so, equitable healthcare, I think, is so much in the fabric and the DNA of who I am. And now I feel like I've went on this personal journey to help me be the type of person that can hold the discomfort that comes with some of these conversations, and that can show up with empathy, grace, compassion, but also fervor, dedication, like being rooted in what it is I believe in and what it is that I think that we should be creating. So I'm curious to see, to your point, where all of this is going to take me. But I know that the only thing I'm meant to do is continue to evolve, continue to show up, continue to grow, continue to challenge myself. And so I'm just trying to be obedient to the things I can control and have faith in the rest, that there is a plan, that things are unfolding. I've spent so much of my life creating the plan, making things happen. I always lived in this like, I got to seize the opportunity because I don't know when the next one is going to come. And I love her. She did so much. She got me here. Like, I honor that version of me, but I want to give her rest and, like, let her rest. She's done her job.
I sometimes wonder, was there not a plan for everything, like if we're talking about Shelina, to unfold the way it unfolded?
Yeah.
Meaning that you would take this path, that you would go in, be at St. Louis, do that work, go on to J&J, do all the different things you did, end up having that pivotal moment that said, I have to go look and do that inner work. And so now you have this opportunity to to say, well, I made all these plans, but they really things unfolded because you showed up the way you showed up, right? And so
It's so interesting you say that because when I was at J&J, everyone always asked me, were you in some sort of rotational program? Because I started in regulatory affairs. I moved to the commercial side on a market access team. I went to business development. I went to marketing. Then I was in corporate affairs. So a lot of times when people look at my professional background, they're like, how did you get so many different experiences? Like, were you on a path? And I'm like, no, like the path just unfolded. Well, even in that microcosm, I can see how it, like looking back on it, it feels like it was organized. It feels like it was a path, even though in the moment it felt a little like, I'm not sure what's next. I'm trying to figure it out, you know?
we could talk about this forever. But I'm going to close out with one last question, Shelina, which I think you'll love. It's your platform today to give a message to women of all ages, of all backgrounds, and of all cultures. What do you want to leave them with?
Oh my goodness, so many things, but I will be disciplined and narrow it down to three. So, one I would say is don't root your identity in what you do. Like, remember that what you do is not who you are. Right. What you do is super important. We spend so much time at work, and I love pouring myself into something, but never confuse that for who you are. Who you are is so much more than what you do. And the reason why I think this is really critical is especially in a season where so many people are getting laid off. If you lose who you are, you might feel so lost in life if who you are was your job and your job is no longer there. I mean, I think that also happens to a lot of people in retirement as well. So I think learning what you do versus who you are is so critical to have those things be distinct in your mind and in your heart. I think the second thing is you got to be willing to give up who you are for who you could be. And that is hard because who you are is the person you know, it's the person that you've built, it's the person that you work so hard for, it's the person that is kind of like home. But there's so much more. And I think as humans, we're meant to evolve. I don't think we're meant to stay stagnant. Now, I want to be clear, though, that we shouldn't always be looking for the next version of ourselves and never live the current version, right? So it's a balance of being able to enjoy where you are now, but I mean to say it emotionally. Like I have been so stuck on who I am and not wanting to let that go. And I had to learn that who I am is so fluid and I need to like loosen the reins to let myself evolve because if not, I'm holding myself back. You deserve to meet that you. You know, you deserve to meet her and to be with her and see what she's excited about and the freedom she feels and the ways that she looks at life. So I would say that. And then the third thing I would say is I have spent so much of my life analyzing myself, thinking about myself. And I saw this thing on Instagram and it said, awareness without compassion is just like torture or something like that. I'm not phrasing it well, but I have just learned so much in the last year about grace, about compassion, about self acceptance, because I've lived so much of my life trying to be perfect, trying to have it all together. And it was because I thought that I was only lovable if I was perfect. And I have learned that like grace, compassion, understanding, acceptance are so critical because the parts of us that we're afraid are unlovable are really just the parts of ourselves that we're avoiding. And like we deserve our own love. We deserve our own acceptance. We deserve to be able to sit with all of us. And we shouldn't have this hierarchy where we make some parts of ourselves lovable and other parts of ourselves not lovable. And really, that's kind of like buying into the idea of like you have to be worthy of love, but you don't have to do anything for love. It just is. So I just say that to the like self-critical girlies like me.
Mhm.
Like you don't need that to be successful. You don't need that to drive you. For years, I believed that I did, but that was really just me withholding love for myself and not learning and knowing how to sit with all the parts of me that I thought were unlovable. And the more that I love those parts of me, the more I see those parts of me, the more love I'm actually able to hold in my life. because I can see other people's imperfections and still love them through it. So those are my three last thoughts.
Those are three big things, and I'm taken aback by all of them. The one that really, I mean, it all sticks with me, but the one that goes through my mind, which is you are not what you do. You are who you are. I just think that's a wonderful message. All three of those very powerful messages. Shelina, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they find you?
Oh, yes. Well, Shelina Ramnarine is not exactly a hard name to find. It's very unique. So you can definitely easily find me on LinkedIn. And, I'm happy to talk to people. And I would love to hear people's stories, their own journeys of how they have navigated some of the things that we've talked about today. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the opportunity to share this mental health journey that I've been on and what mental health means to me and some of the things that I've learned along the way.
Well, thank you so much for getting under the hood and for being open and having such grace and sharing your story. Thank you, Shelina.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer, her song Rose.